Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. We're just waiting a couple of minutes to start for everyone to be able to join the session today. Can you hear me well?
Loud and clear. Thanks, Monica.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I think we could start. It is just 2 minutes past 2 p.m. As I say, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone that is joining from different places, whatever you are. Thanks so much for joining the second webinar of the Prevention Webinar Series, focusing today on implementation and monitoring. My name is Monica Martinez, and I'm the Primary Prevention Program Manager with Plan USNO. Well, I give you a little bit of an introduction to the webinar, the structure that we'll have today. Please feel free to use the chat that you will see at the bottom to write your name, your title, and the organization you work for, so we can have a better understanding of who is today with us in the room. Also, just to let you know, you will be able to ask questions throughout the webinar by placing them on the Q&A function that you'll find at the bottom of your screen, the bar. And so we'll be monitoring those questions and answering as we go along. And alternatively, you can also save the questions for the Q&A allocated time towards the end of the presentation today, where we'll have our key speakers to be able also to respond to your questions. Also, just to let you know, we're actually really pleased to have an interpretation function today. So we'll be interpreting also in French for those French speakers that would like to join more comfortably. So basically, to use it, you need to click on the globe icon at the bottom of your panel and select the language in which you prefer to be listening to the seminar, to the webinar today. I hope that is clear. Okay, thank you, Kira. So this slide basically is to just introduce you to the wonderful colleagues that will be facilitating with me today. I have the pleasure of counting with this group of great presenters who will be take us through the various subsections of the today webinar. First is Michelle Benakin. She is the Child Protection in Emergencies Technical Advisor at Plan USNO. And she is one of the people that knows more about primary prevention since she has been involved on it from the very beginning. So we're very pleased to have her today. And she will be giving us like an overview of the prevention initiative, the different levels of prevention, and also talking about the primary prevention framework as our fundamental tool in advancing the work on primary prevention. Then we also have Kobo Esul, who is a child protection emergency specialist working at Plan Niger country office, and he will telling us about the experience and the learning that we are extracting from the implementation of the prevention framework in one of the pilot countries, which is Niger. Then we'll move to Malis Clemens, who is the program manager and acting field coordinator with Plan South Sudan. And then he will be speaking about the experience and the learning from the second pilot country, which is South Sudan. And after him, we'll have Anthony Onen, who is the MERL specialist at Plan South Sudan too. And he will be giving us also some insights and learnings about the monitoring part of the implementation and monitoring phase, and what we are learning in terms of how to monitor a prevention program. Next slides, please. All right, so as mentioned before, this is the second of a series of webinars that started a few months ago, I think in September last year, if I am not mistaken, and will continue to the end of the program toward the end of this year. The webinars, as well as the prevention framework itself, are built around the program management cycle. So basically, each of the sessions of these sessions of webinars is designed to reflect each of the phases described in the primary prevention framework. So as you can see there, the first webinar was last year and focused on preparedness, needs assessment, and design. And if you haven't yet, I encourage you to go and listen to the recording of that webinar, because it's actually really interesting with lots of insights on how the preparedness and needs assessment phase went in the two pilot countries. And today we are diving into the implementation and monitoring part. You see the gray area a little bit like farther away. And we'll have then another one coming up in September on evaluation and learning. And again, looking at the lessons that we are learning and extracting and how this will be integrated in the final review of the primary prevention framework. So this is just to give you an overview of the series of webinars. Next slides, please, Kira. Okay, so on this one, I just wanted to show you some of the learning objectives from today. The overall objective of the prevention series of the webinar is to share lessons that we're learning from the piloting of the primary prevention framework and why we think that this is important. This is important to inform colleagues and organizations who are interested in implementing primary prevention approaches through applying the framework so that we can know and discuss and learn about us. What are the challenges? What are the solutions that we are finding? Concretely, today, we'll also be looking a part of those challenges and the solutions that we have encountered and we have put in place. We'll be also looking at some of the lessons that we are learning and how best to approach the implementation of a primary prevention program, and what are some of the main issues that we can see that are interesting for us to keep advancing and keep enhancing the capacity to implement primary prevention approaches. Then, towards the end, we'll be sharing some tools and guidance on the framework and more broadly, other guidance, documents, videos, any other materials that the Prevention Initiative and other resources that you might find useful if you want to learn more or you want to use it into your daily programming. But I mean, we just hope the organizing team, we just hope that you will feel at home with us today, feel comfortable to ask any questions you might have, as well as suggestions or even new ideas, because we are actually all learning with this pilot, and your opinion is actually very relevant to us. And with that, I think I will give you to my colleague, Michelle, who, as I mentioned before, will be giving us a more detailed overview on the Prevention Initiative and the prevention framework in the next section. Over to you, Michelle.
Great, thanks, Monica. And I'm so excited to see everybody on this webinar. So to give everybody a bit of background on the Prevention Initiative, before diving into our updates. So the Prevention Initiative was started by the Alliance for Child Protection and Humanitarian Action back in 2020. And the goal is to promote increased understanding and prioritization of efforts to prevent harm to children in humanitarian setting. Now, what does that mean? As you all know, hopefully, child protection is the prevention of and response to violence, abuse, neglect, and exploitation of children. We have done a lot of work and we have a wealth of resources on responding to harm after it's occurred. If you think about case management, if you think about the work that we should do in child-friendly spaces. However, we have not done as much work on preventing harm before it can occur. So with this in mind and wanting to really fulfill our duty in terms as child protection practitioners, in terms of both responding to harm, but then also preventing it, the Alliance started this initiative in 2020, as I mentioned, and made prevention a strategic priority as part of our strategic plan for 2021 to 2025. As some of you may remember, back in 2021, the Alliance annual meeting's theme was on prevention and really highlighting this important area of work. This initiative is led by the Alliance Secretariat, usually led by a prevention focal point, a role that we are currently recruiting for. We'll have somebody new in soon. And has a over 30-member interagency advisory group that really spans both child protection practitioners, academics, and including local, national, international NGOs, UN, donors, clusters. So really looking at this from a holistic perspective. Next slide, please. And now just to refresh your memory on what do we mean when we say primary prevention, we mean addressing root causes among a population in order to reduce the likelihood of harmful outcomes. So the idea here is that we want to prevent harm before it can occur. And in order to do so, we must address underlying risk factors that can lead to harm. We must mitigate those risk factors. And we also are looking to strengthen protective factors. You can find out more around primary prevention and child protection in the primary prevention framework for child protection and humanitarian action. And I will drop a link in the chat so that you can access that framework. But the framework was released in January 2022 and really looks at how can we prevent harm across our programming. And with that in mind, and so this was a resource that was developed by Plan in support of, well, it was led by the development was led by Plan with the support of the Interagency Advisory Group and the Alliance. And following the development of this, we then wanted to see primary prevention in action and really test this framework. And so with that in mind, I will hand it over to Monica.
Thank you, Michelle. Oops. Can we go to the next slide, actually, Kira? Oh, okay, no, previous one. Oh, this one, yeah. So, sorry, just a little bit of a confusion with the slides there. But basically, we realized that for those of you who might not have a lot of information on the actual program itself, we have put together this very simple, straightforward biodata of the program, just giving you the main sort of features. So, the title is quite long, as you can see. It's called Strengthening the Capacity of Global Child Protection Humanitarian Actors to Prevent Harm to Children. It's funded by BHA, as you can see, and the main goal is for child protection and humanitarian action practitioners to utilize a field-tested and evidence-based, and this is really important for us, and this is the reason for the pilot, like that what we are putting out there for practitioners to use, it's been tested and is informed by the evidence that we are collecting. Primary prevention framework to do what? To prevent harm to children before it can occur, as Michelle was just mentioning before. This is to the main objective of the program. And then we have the main goal, and then we have two objectives. The first one is to pilot actually prevention framework, and then to be able to incorporate all the lessons that we are learning, all the feedback from the pilot countries. And then the second objective is to develop and test, monitor, and evaluation guide to accompany the prevention framework. And what is this? This is because it's really important to remark again that this being a pilot has a strong learning component. And we know from discussions and consultations with various stakeholders at different levels, the different actors that have been involved throughout the whole process, that one of the areas where the framework could be strengthened is by incorporating an M&E guide. This is like having a methodology and tools on monitoring and evaluation of specifically prevention programs that is going to help us to capture the impact that we're having with the program. Of course, the tools should be broad enough that can be utilized and contextualized to all the different contexts and places where the framework would be implemented. So this is the second objective that we're hoping to achieve over the course of the program. As you can see there, the two pilot countries are Niger, concretely on DIFA region, and South Sudan, and again, more concretely in J, where the experience is a protracted crisis for a while now. And the duration of the program is 24 months altogether. So that was just to give you a little bit of an overview. And then, yes, we go to this implementation. Next slide, please. So, okay, I wanted to show you this just to again set up our mind. As the prevention framework is set to follow the program management cycle, the first step of the programming was the preparedness phase. You can see there in the green in the left corner, where we actually aim and work with the teams in the field and local authorities and other relevant stakeholders to understand and document as much as possible the context and the situation in the country, the region, the capacity of the teams, our allies, our networks, and obviously to work with the communities, to know better the communities where we're working and building on other programs that were already ongoing. And always focusing on understanding and analyzing the root causes of harm to children. Then the teams moved to the next phase, which was the needs and assessment and situational analysis. And this phase included a very interesting exercise to understand and document the risk and protected factors related to the types of harm that children are experiencing in these two places in Difa and Jay, Niger and South Sudan. So the concrete child protection harmful outcomes identified, obviously because of the, among many others, but because of the relevance and the prevalence, were child marriage in the case of Niger, and child marriage and child labor in the case of South Sudan. And again, it goes without saying that the identification of these risk and protected factors, the ranking of them, which one has more impact and prevalence, and the validation of this was a community-led process that brought together women, men, children, adolescents, community and religious leaders in the targeted communities, as well as other relevant stakeholders for the local context. And that link, maybe you can also put it on the chat, the link to the risk and protected factors guide, because it's also a very interesting document that you might want to have a look. So then with those risks and protected factors identified at the community level and understanding where to focus, the teams set to design the program phase. And this phase is where we develop the theory of change of the program, log frames, work plans, M&E, and other tools that we'll need to implement the program. And after that, we move to the current phase that you can see it circled there, which is the current phase, which is implementation and monitoring. And what we're doing, thank you for that. And obviously what we're doing is implementing the activities that we design in the design phase towards the completion of the program goals. I won't go too much into the detail because we have our next presenters, our next panelists that will give you greater detail in a few seconds. But just to say that during this phase, it's really important to be able to monitor the changes in the previously identified risk and protected factors. And why is that? This is to be able to have the flexibility to adjust programming, so to be able to respond to those changes. And for this, early this year, we conducted a midpoint monitoring workshop, again, bringing together communities, local authorities, relevant stakeholders to look at program progress towards the results and to be able to put in place realistic measures towards the achievement of the goals. And then we also conducted an abbreviated midpoint risk and protected factors exercise. So because according to the guidance on identifying risk and protected factors, it's to do a brief reassessment of monitoring of these risks and protected factors towards the midpoint of the implementation of the program. It's relevant, especially when there could be a change in the humanitarian situation of the program. So this was relevant in the case of Niger, who, for example, where they experienced the coup d'etat last July, or in the case of South Sudan, given the ongoing economic deterioration that the country is suffering. So then when we complete this phase, we'll just move to the evaluation and learning phase. And again, this is a very extremely important phase because one of the main objectives, as I have mentioned before, is to extract as much practical learning as possible on what is working and what is useful, what needs to be changed and adapted to later produce the revision of the framework. And it's important from my point of view to highlight that this is, while this evaluation and learning, it's been described and as a phase in itself, the learning and evaluating, it goes throughout, it's a cross-cutting across all of each of the phases. So we've been learning during the preparedness, we've been learning during the next assessment and during the implementation. So that all that learning can be compiled. And just to highlight again that to design an effective primary prevention program, we will need to follow all the steps in each of the phases. And obviously, we always need to keep in mind the objective of a primary prevention approach, which is to work to address the root causes of harmful outcomes for children. And without further ado, I think I'll give to Kobo, our colleague from Plan Niger, who will be talking about the experiences specifically of the implementation phase in DIFA region. Over to you, Kobo.
Merci beaucoup, Monica, de m'avoir accordé la parole pour essayer de partager l'expérience du Niger sur la mise en œuvre du projet pilote. Next slide. Prochain slide. Next slide. Nous avons mis en œuvre le projet pilote dans la région de Difa, notamment dans la cité de Ricolo. Et ce projet avait comme objectif notamment de prévenir le mariage des enfants à travers le renforcement d'un environnement protecteur. Et pour réaliser cet objectif, on a préconisé 3 résultats principaux qui est lié premièrement à réduire les risques associés avec le manque d'enregistrement à l'état civil, aussi aux conséquences du manque de documents légaux d'état civil. Après cela, le résultat 2, c'était lié à l'amélioration de la rétention des enfants de l'âge de 9 à 15 ans dans l'éducation inclusive dans les écoles du Ricolo. Et enfin, on devait améliorer l'accès aux activités de livelihood et aux opportunités de livelihood. Next slide. Prochain slide. Prochain slide, s'il vous plaît.
Kira, if you can move to the next slide, please.
Next slide, please. Alors, quelles ont été les réalisations? En fait, avant de parler des réalisations, je vais juste essayer de dire que l'approche de mise en œuvre de la prévention primaire s'attaque aux causes profondes et que ces causes profondes ont été identifiées lors des exercices précédents initiaux qu'on a fait pour l'identification et la priorisation des facteurs de risque et des facteurs de protection. À titre d'exemple, en ce qui concerne l'enregistrement de naissance, on a remarqué que le fait que l'enfant manque ou ne puisse pas avoir un certificat de naissance avait un impact sur le préjudice qu'il pourrait subir. Le manque de documents d'état civil peut amener à ce que l'enfant puisse subir des préjudices ou de la maltraitance dans sa vie. Un autre exemple dont je peux mentionner, c'est vraiment lié aux activités de l'éducation et la scolarisation. Le fait que les enfants puissent aller à l'école, ça limite un peu tout ce qu'il y a comme risque pour entrer dans les situations, par exemple, de mariage des enfants et autres situations. Alors, essayons de parler maintenant de réalisation. La première réalisation dont je peux mettre en évidence, c'est vraiment cette augmentation de l'enregistrement de naissance, comme vous pouvez voir dans le tableau. Pour cela, il s'agissait de travailler avec l'état civil, les structures de santé du Ricolo, et on a essayé de développer un protocole tripartite pour ce travail-là. Et pour cela, nous avons vraiment aidé la communauté à augmenter la situation d'enregistrement de naissance au niveau de Ricolo à travers ce travail de coordination que l'on a eu avec les structures de santé et la mairie de Ricolo. Dans ce travail que l'on a eu, on a plus ou moins sélectionné des volontaires communautaires qui étaient comme des catalyseurs dans cette action-là de travail. Et par rapport à ce travail-là, il y a aussi d'autres membres de réseau qui constituent un réseau de communication avec 14 membres de la communauté qui vraiment aidaient dans les alertes et dans l'accompagnement pour que les cas identifiés puissent être référés vers les structures de santé et les structures de santé après qu'on puisse avoir un grand nombre d'enfants enregistrés et rapportés par ce système-là. Et tout au long du projet, on est plus ou moins arrivé à avoir 429 enfants enregistrés et on a encore plus ou moins en situation de pending qui, pour confirmation, 430 enfants qui sont en attente de pouvoir être enregistrés, pour un total de plus ou moins 859 enfants enregistrés. Un autre niveau de réalisation dont je dois faire mention, ça concerne principalement l'amélioration ou bien le soutien qu'on a fait sur la qualité de l'éducation. Alors, dans ce domaine-là, on avait comme travail de travailler avec le corps enseignant pour identifier et les aider à connaître des solutions pour faire face aux défis existants en matière de maintien de l'enfant et d'assurer la qualité de l'éducation. Fort de cela, les enseignants ont élaboré un plan de plaidoyer basé sur l'analyse des résultats des discussions de groupe pour essayer eux-mêmes de canaliser les efforts pour essayer d'adresser certaines situations de défis au niveau du travail quotidien et de la qualité de l'éducation, et surtout pour assurer l'éducation institutionnelle. À un autre niveau, on a également travaillé avec le gouvernement scolaire, et notamment les enfants, et ils ont élaboré, après avoir reçu plusieurs formations, des plans d'action pour améliorer l'environnement scolaire afin d'encourager l'assiduité et une bonne participation aux activités scolaires. Au début du projet, je dois noter qu'il existait des groupes d'élèves, mais ils fonctionnaient de manière symbolique, avec vraiment un moindre impact sur la scolarité, sur l'engouement et sur les initiatives au niveau scolaire. Par exemple, les élèves ne connaissaient pas ou ne comprenaient pas très bien l'objectif du groupe ou leur rôle au sein des différents groupes. Ces groupes n'étaient pas tellement participatifs et non plus inclusifs. Alors, nos équipes, surtout les équipes de protection de l'enfance, ont collaboré avec les élèves pour élaborer des lignes directrices pour formation et le fonctionnement des différents groupes et pour les doter également des différents matériels afin de canaliser les actions du gouvernement scolaire. Ces exercices ont été menés, franchement, à travers des conversations, des discussions de groupes avec les élèves et les enseignants, et plan à organiser des groupes de discussion avec plus ou moins 20 membres des associations d'élèves afin d'identifier les obstacles au maintien à l'école et de discuter des solutions potentielles. Sur base de ces différentes consultations, les élèves se sont réunis pour créer des plans d'action et vraiment développer des actions eux-mêmes de leur propre initiative afin d'aider à l'amélioration de l'environnement scolaire et du cadre de l'éducation. Au niveau de ce secteur-là, des réalisations, je veux aussi essayer de parler du renforcement des capacités des enseignants en matière d'éducation inclusive, qui a été fait en collaboration avec les inspecteurs et les membres du ministère de l'Éducation. Et ils ont assuré une formation de plus ou moins 3 jours, où les principaux domaines couverts par l'atelier étaient les techniques pédagogiques pour les enseignements inclusifs et autres éléments de qualité de l'éducation afin vraiment de mieux les accompagner à assurer cette qualité et une éducation inclusive. Le dernier élément qui est aussi autant impactant que les autres, c'est vraiment le fait d'avoir assuré aux femmes et surtout aux responsables de ménage des activités génératrices de revenus qui, eux, vont impacter sur comment je peux dire, la contribution des ménages, la contribution des familles dans les activités d'éducation et qui ont pu impacter également sur le niveau de la protection, parce que tout soutien apporté à la famille a un impact sur le bien-être et l'éducation des enfants, notamment aussi sur les activités de protection. Next slide, please. Prochain slide. Alors, essayons de parler aussi de défis et des solutions qui ont été préconisées. Euh, À ce titre, je voulais juste mentionner qu'une approche de prévention primaire fonctionne au niveau de la population, comme l'a présenté Monica. Vraiment, c'est une approche qui est basée sur la population en général. Mais il est difficile de travailler avec ce grand échantillon, mais il nous faut vraiment définir clairement ce qui peut être l'échantillon, bien la sous-population avec qui on peut travailler. Et ces éléments constituent euh, vraiment défi. Par exemple, dans le cas du Niger et des activités qui sont liées aux moyens de subsistance, euh, on a remarqué que notre approche, par exemple, était de pouvoir assurer de pouvoir avoir un échantillon, mais on ne savait pas clairement quelle était la dimension de l'échantillon à prendre en compte. Et on avait défini des critères tels que le niveau de pauvreté et tout, et tout, et tout, et tout, pour pouvoir vraiment déterminer cela avec la communauté. On a essayé un peu de développer les critères d'éligibilité par rapport à quoi. Et par rapport à ça, donc, ce qu'on doit retenir comme leçon est que l'approche des préventions primaires doit garantir des ressources et un temps approprié pour atteindre l'ensemble de cette sous-population avec cette activité. Elle doit également garantir l'engagement et la coordination avec d'autres acteurs, y compris d'autres organisations, telles que le gouvernement et les autres donateurs, pour faire en sorte que non, euh, on puisse avoir un échantillon plus large. Parce que si on a juste les moyens pour couvrir une partie de la population, on ne peut pas atteindre la grande partie. Il faut mobiliser les fonds pour assurer que cette approche de prévention primaire atteigne un éventail plus large afin de pouvoir, comment je peux dire, adresser les facteurs de risque qui ont été identifiés. Euh, Qu'est-ce que nous avons appris par rapport à cela? Euh, j'ai déjà parlé par rapport au fond. Une approche de prévention primaire qui comprend un volet sur le moyen de subsistance doit nécessairement prendre en compte aussi euh, une planification à long terme afin d'atteindre la population la plus large. Donc, on doit tenir compte de fonds. On doit aussi faire une projection à plus long terme pour pouvoir couvrir tous ces aspects-là. Donc, il faudra donc recommander à l'audience, par exemple, de définir et expliquer plus clairement le concept de travail avec une sous-population dans le cadre d'une approche de prévention primaire. On doit aussi essayer d'avoir une meilleure compréhension du coût de démarrage pour la prévention primaire et ensuite de savoir comment assurer cet engagement des acteurs des différents secteurs et des donateurs pour afin partager avec eux le coût et atteindre un plus grand nombre de populations pour un meilleur résultat par rapport à cette approche-là. Voilà un peu ce que je peux, de manière synthèse, dire sur le défi et les solutions quand on l'a mis à sa œuvre. Euh, le dernier slide. Last slide. Next. Je vous remercie.
Merci.
Et je passe la parole à Malish pour la suite.
Ah, ok.
Okay.
Hello.
Thank you, Kovo, Monica, Michelle, everybody. Bon après-midi to our colleagues from West Africa. This is Malis Clement sharing the experiences of South Sudan. So, go to the next slide. So basically, our major project goal is to prevent child marriage and child labor in targeted locations through improving access to livelihoods and quality education. So the project has two major outcomes. One is improve access to livelihood opportunities for households in targeted area. The second outcome is increased enrollment and quality educational opportunities in targeted areas. Next slide. So basically, in terms of the achievement, we were able to achieve the following. The first outcome, which talks about vulnerable households to increase their livelihood capacity, we were able to provide conditional cash assistance to 10 vulnerable families so that they can be able to use that cash to purchase their basic needs. And we also provided 15 households with some small grants so that they can be able to establish some businesses. And all the 10 plus the 15 were able to establish some businesses, generating for them some income to address the needs of the children in order to reduce child labor and child marriage. Meanwhile, 90 community members increased their financial literacy, and they participated in financial literacy training so that they can also be able to have the knowledge and skills to be able to manage their businesses. And most of them operate shops selling assorted food items such as maize, sugar, cassava, flour, beans, vegetables, sesame, fish, and many more. And 25 beneficiaries received positive parenting sessions in parallel. So we realized that besides giving the conditional kits and the VSLA so that they do some business, we also taught them some kind of knowledge on how to parent children and how to support children during times of crisis. And we found out that this worked very well because participants themselves were also able to understand that their behavior somehow also contributed to child abuse, and having both aspects going in parallel was a great support to the children itself. So, under the second outcome of strengthening capacity of schools to have uphold interactive and participatory teaching as a protective factor against child labor and child marriage, we were able to bring 40 teachers, including parents, and they were able to undergo capacity building to identify barriers hindering participatory learning and to design solutions through the design of participatory engagement plan. And then through that, the participatory engagement action plan is being implemented, and this is enhancing participation of learners, participation of teachers, and the use of participatory methods. And I think it is also attracting attention of children to remain in school. And 50 children were supported with the scholastic materials, and the selection was both based on the inability of their caregivers to afford these materials, placing children at risk of dropout. So as we talk now, the 50 children who are supported with basic materials are actually attending classes regularly. So this means that if a child is able to attend classes regularly, the likelihood of engaging in child labor and child marriage is lower because he or she is always at school. And then also we have increased retention and decreasing dropping out as increasing protective factors against child labor and child marriage. Go to the next slide. Yeah, so in the course of implementing these activities, we also experience some challenges. For example, we have an ongoing economic crisis in the country where we have local currency losing value on daily basis against the US dollars. And this has impacted greatly on the businesses of those whom we gave some small grant to be able to do some business. Secondly, we also have the daily changes in prices of goods and services as a result of daily changes in exchange rates. This also affected the businesses of the 25 we supported. And then also the grant or the cash support we provided, the conditional cash we provided, also couldn't be sufficient to buy whatever they needed. Then besides that, we are also having an external factor impacting achievement of project goal, where we have a situation of teachers not having been paid for the last 5, 6, or 7 months. So you can see that if a teacher is not paid for the last 6 or 7 months, this also affects the motivation and the morale of the teacher to be able to deliver lessons. And this in itself also affects the participatory engagement we are talking about. So this is an external factor that is beyond our control, but of course it has an impact in this framework. So what we are learning is that it is essential to consider the external factors that may impact implementation of the primary preventive approach. So going forward, if we are to design a primary prevention program, we need to consider the external factors and then be able to see what we can do lesson so that we are able to achieve the goal we need. And secondly, NGOs alone cannot and should not address structural problems. Some of these issues are structural problems. However, we can always maximize engagement with the relevant government stakeholders who are duty bearers so that we try to see how to address some of the external challenges that may in turn affect the prevention framework. And secondly, we will also need to increase advocacy efforts with relevant stakeholders so that they can also be able to do their part. For example, when you talk about teachers not being paid for the last 8 months. And also going forward, we will need to build in flexibility to adjust to the changing environment. So we know that there are certain responsibilities, for example, payment of teachers, that is solely the responsibility of government. But where it is not working practically, then something needs to come, something needs to be considered in an event where we are having primary prevention framework design. Some flexibility needs to come in to cover those gaps if we were to achieve the goal. Next slide. Yeah, so basically, during the start of this project and engagements, we basically identified 2 major risk factors: lack of access to education and lack of livelihoods. So the program also identified compounded needs at the household levels. So this means that for us to be able to approach a primary prevention framework going forward, we need to look at the compound needs and we need to analyze them thoroughly so that we see how we can be able to tackle those issues to be able to achieve the goal we need in the event of implementing a primary prevention framework. So this means going forward, we will need to do or design an integrated approach. And currently, we are having the livelihood opportunity where we give conditional cash assistance and unit savings and loan association grants, besides the parallel positive parenting that we do. So this has been working very well, and there has been a lot of learning in the parenting session, which in one way or the other also has been contributing to creating, a positive or a protective environment for children in order, and it has also been helping in realizing some of the behaviors that will be abusive. And by so doing, if continued, this will possibly also lessen chances of abuse, and which may also contribute to child labor or child marriage. So we are still learning that when we integrate various sectors at work, we are more likely to holistically enhance the protective capacity of families to prevent harm to children. So all this need to be integrated. They cannot work in isolation. So for us to be able to do this going forward, we will need to do analysis of compound needs at household level, looking at the rings of responsibility around the child so that we can be able to address the issues holistically. And this, by so doing, we'll also be able to generate more evidence or examples on how to integrate programming that can contribute to primary prevention. So basically from South Sudan, this is what we have done, and some of the lessons we have learned that can also be able to inform the improvement of future engagements, proposals, and programs. So far, this is what I can say. Thank you so much for listening. I remain available for questions at the end of this presentation. So for now, let me pass the opportunity to my colleague, Onen. Over to you, Anthony, Onen, for the monitoring aspects. Thank you.
Thank you very much, colleagues, in this wonderful learning event. Anthony, and then is my name from South Sudan. And as part of our project implementation and cycle management, we managed to initiate the evaluation bit of the project, and that is the baseline, but also proceeded to perform other monitoring functions as well. So I'm going to share the experience from South Sudan. Next slide, please. So from South Sudan, in terms of monitoring and evaluation, we developed a detailed M&D framework, which included all the indicators at the output, outcome, and impact level, including their descriptions, means of verifications and measurements. So that helped us to go around the baseline quite easily. We developed a methodology for the baseline, which was mostly quantitative, because they required us to sample. And then we also developed the tools to measure the outcome indicators and the impact indicators for the pilot project. The baseline was initiated around October last year, 2023. However, we completed it a bit late because children broke off in the middle, so we had to wait for them. And learners were part of the sample participants for the baseline. In addition to the baseline, we also do regular monitoring, which include field observation. This is to ensure that things are being done correctly, and if they are not being done correctly, then correction measures are put in place, but also to determine the quality element of the implementation. Another aspect was the workshops and the training reports. When trainings are done, and the team proceeds to ensure that they capture the pre-test and post-test results for, especially those ones linked to the indicators that we are interested in at the output level and a few at outcome level. So these reports are developed and then placed following the activity of the training, which are most related to knowledge, knowledge addition on the part of the beneficiaries or the part of project participants. Another element is the post-distribution monitoring from the prevention angle. This one especially aims to capture the effectiveness and efficiency of the items distributed, which include things like cash, include consumables like scholastic materials and others. So here we ensure that the items distributed fit with the needs of the beneficiaries. The items distributed do not cause more harm to the beneficiaries in terms of the distance that the beneficiaries move. We can find that some beneficiaries may have to move over 5 kilometers. So you find that the beneficiary will have to walk long distances and need insecurity and things like that. So post-distribution monitoring helps us to find out the distance, were the items delivered in a quality, in a timely manner, was the quality appropriate, did they get information prior, did the plant staff inform them, and whether they even know about Plan International. So the post-distribution monitoring helps us, but also it also helps us to also determine some indicator results, especially those ones which are attached to satisfaction. Another element which should come at the end of the project is the end line or outcome evaluation. Here is where we are going to now assess the progress that the project has made against the baseline which we did. So this should come in the future, and I'm looking forward to see the end results of this. Plans are to have an external evaluator so that we can accurately and we can gauge the effectiveness of our indicators from an independent person. When it comes to a primary prevention framework effectiveness evaluation, we need to now look at beyond the pilots. Okay? Beyond the pilots, what next? What models can be adopted so that this can be made better. The effectiveness of the primary prevention framework on the contributing of the results. We also need to see how has this initiative contributed to the results we see. We also need a qualitative nature because quantitative indicators at times are very specific and they're very robust, and they give us the perspective from a change perspective, but also these interventions have changed the lives of the beneficiaries in many other ways. And it will really be good to get the beneficiaries and see which other ways can we learn which other things can we learn from the beneficiaries that have impacted on their lives, the intended and unintended, the positives and the negatives, to see how we can adjust and better draw better projects which are effective, especially in primary prevention. Next, please. So in terms of baseline assessment, I just need to give you an overview. I already said we use a quantitative approach, and we mostly use 3 tools which were related to the outcome areas. In terms of the livelihoods. We used the livelihood survey tool, and this was administered to participants who have received conditional cash and those ones in the VSLA, Voluntary Loans Association, and Voluntary Loans and Savings Association. So this tool was used to capture the responses from those categories. Then we have the broader community survey to assess the general knowledge and livelihoods opportunities in the community. Much as the first tool focused on the beneficiaries, the second tool focused on the general community, especially assessing the impact of the advocacy that we had on the community, because we are providing information to all the community members, including the ones who are receiving cash assistance and the ones in the savings association. The other tool that we used was the school environment tool. This one was administered to learners in the school to assess the school environment, especially in terms of the learning in the school. We wanted to find out the school environment, are they conducive, are they favorable, are learners being well handled by the teachers, so that we can assess. This was done because during the assessment, we found out that some learners were dropping out because the school, they claimed the school environment was not conducive. There are some issues. They had some, they claimed that some teachers were not handling them well. So this tool was developed, and it was mostly anchored around global indicators, including those of Plan International. Just to give you a snapshot of the findings, in terms of child marriages, we realized that we needed to use a proxy because it's difficult to measure whether child marriage has changed within 6 months, a year, or 2 years. It's a long-term thing. So we asked the children to find out if they knew of children getting married before the age of 18 years. So we found out that 100% of boys and girls reported that children getting married before the age of 18 years is a common practice, and our sample was 382. So that means that virtually all the children know that children get married below the age of 18, and it's a common practice. The other key finding that report, 13% of the household reported being able to meet their basic needs without relying on child labor. So only 13% do not engage children in household activities. For example, children are sent to sell tea, they're sent to sell at the market, they're sent to herd animals, take care of livestock, including household chores which are beyond beyond the capacity and ability of the children. Another finding was that slightly more than half, 55% of the conditional cash assistance beneficiaries felt confident of being able to increase or improve their livelihoods or economic opportunities because of the assistance. This one was to demonstrate the level of confidence and the enthusiasm that the beneficiaries had in terms of utilizing the cash provided to increase their life. Especially when it was identified that children are dropping out of schools, are getting married because of at an early age, because parents are not in the position to provide the basic needs due to poverty in the area, mostly brought by the many years of conflict in the area. Another key finding was also that less than half of the caregivers, about 62%, were using positive parenting practices with different children at the time of the first line. Ideally, we found out that most of the parents do not use positive parenting approach, and yet we felt that if conditional cash assistance coupled with the Village Loans and Savings Association are coupled together, and then they are also provided with positive parenting approaches, then we would like to see that parents prioritize children and put them at the center of household expenditures, household needs, household priorities. So, so we still more work to do here and in terms of positive parenting, and we hope that by the end of the project, this 42% would have improved. These scores were computed against a set of questions which were computed, and pass mark was given for the cutoff. Thank you. Next. So another question we'd like to ask ourselves is, what are we learning in terms of monitoring? In terms of monitoring, outcome evaluation needs to include a component on how the program served to present harm to children, especially in terms of child labor and child marriage. So at the moment, we looked at the brief highlights, but at the end of the project, the indicators will be assessed. But before the project comes to a close, continuous engagement with the communities need to be made, especially in terms of monitoring, to engage the key stakeholders at the government level, at the partner level, at the community level, to assess the impact of our interventions, whether they are having the desired impact or not. So this is done regularly, especially with the project teams and the monitoring. And in addition, also with the quarterly reviews. Quarterly reviews are held to assess how we are progressing with the achievement of our indicators generated from the indicator tracking tables that are produced monthly and tracked quarterly. However, the project has also had some limitations, and I would like to say that the primary prevention is a long-term approach, social behavior change. However, with the pilot, which is a shorter, about 12 months or less, we find that you're not able to track the long-term social behavior change benefits that we expect to see. So that we hope that this project could be replicated with a much longer duration, so that we can see how we can develop adaptive approaches on how to reduce child labor and child marriages, which is very, very rampant and very high in the communities of Yei where the project is being implemented. And the two are interlinked. When children are subjected to child labor, then some of them wish to get married. And when they get married, and then the cycle will continue. Limited time and then the sample. Yeah, the limited time, you see, I've talked about. And then the samples. Being a pilot, we find that for South Sudan, you have 25 project participants, and when you try to do a sample, statistically, it will give you something close to the whole sample. So the idea of sampling may not make so much sense, but if we have a bigger number of beneficiaries, then the sampling can easily come out clearly. And then next is the prevention, the absence of something occurring, therefore just using a proxy. What we are doing is to prevent, but in case of the absence of the project, that is what will truly tell us how the project contributed. So much as we shall have indicators to measure, to quantify, it might leave out some other impacts that the project generated, especially the unintended, which may be positive in this case. Next, please. Next slide. Yeah, thank you very much. Here is just a summary of the primary prevention project in South Sudan. You can see you have the outcome one, which my colleague Marisha has already presented, improving access to livelihoods opportunities. And then two, increasing enrollment and retention in school and quality education, especially by improving the project environment. thank you very much. And that is the presentation I had from you. Next.
Yes, thank you so much, Anthony. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh.
Over to you, Monica.
Yeah,
Thank you so much. Over to you.
Thank you through the three of you, Kobo, Malice, Anthony. I think it's been a really great overview of the things that we're doing or the programs implementing, some of the issues that we have found through, like, as we went along, and solutions that we provided and where we're learning, both in terms of implementation and monitoring. So now I'd like to open. I know some of you have been already posting questions on the Q&A function, which is great, and I hope that we have managed to and answer them satisfactorily. And I think we still have like 15 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes for questions now that you might be able to address directly to our panelists. Anything that you would like to go a bit deeper, understand better. So please, this is now the time for the questions, if there is any. So don't feel shy, and you can actually, raise your hand or even unmute yourself and just, chat with the team.
So I think, Monica, an interesting question we have from Ring is whether Plan partnered with any local actors in Niger and South Sudan, keeping in mind the importance of localization.
Does anyone, Kobo, Anthony, Kobo or Malice, you want to take that one on?
Okay. Yeah, thank you so much for that question. Basically, in the implementation of this project, Plan implemented directly, considering the fact that it is a short-term project with a few months. So Plan implemented it directly. However, when it comes to the localization agenda, actually Plan International is already moving towards that direction. We already have some projects that are being implemented through partners, and in the next FY 2025, come July, going forward, it is already a strategic direction that Plan International will be working through partners. So going forward, should there be future programs that will be addressing primary prevention, since Plan has already looked at that as a strategy in a strategic direction to work through partners, this is a possibility. But for now, this has been implemented directly by Plan. Maybe Anthony Onen, if you have something to add. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. In terms of partnership, we have not had partnership with another organization in terms of implementation, mostly due to the budget bit of it. But we have strongly partnered with the government, the state level government, and they are right behind us and are very interested to see how we deliver this project. So we have already partnered with government, and I think once the project is rolled out, replicated, and made bigger, then I think we can really partner with other organizations to co-implement this project. So yes, government and community, those are our partners and allies. Over to you.
If I may jump in here as well, just to speak from a broader perspective. So as my colleagues in South Sudan have put really well, unfortunately, due to the nature of the piloting exercise and the limitations we had in terms of time, budget, etc., we were not able to work closely with a local partner. However, the Primary Prevention Framework does emphasize the importance of localization and really taking a both a community-led approach, but also really empowering local organizations to lead in a primary preventive approach. The important thing with primary prevention is that it really needs to be rooted in each unique context. Like, this is not something where you can even attempt to do a one-size-fits-all approach. It really needs to be rooted in the primary risk factors that you assess as existing in a specific community. It needs to be rooted in the protective factors that you have. And so in order to really do that, you need to have a deep contextual understanding of where you're working and really who has that knowledge, who has that understanding of like existing protective factors, of existing risk factors, of also when we're talking about the external factors that are beyond our control as planned, but who has those like relationships built with local government, local key stakeholders. It's really communities, and it's really like local NGOs and CSOs. So while unfortunately under this pilot, we were not able to have a local partner or to fund a local NGO to do this, it is something that a primary prevention approach and the prevention initiative really does emphasize, is that importance, because, and especially if we're thinking about primary prevention as a longer term approach, this is not something that you can achieve in a 6-month project or a 1-year project. It necessarily needs to take place over a longer time frame. And that means that international NGOs are not necessarily the best place, because we may not always be in a community, but however, local NGOs, CSOs do have that long-term presence, do have that deep understanding, and do have those strong relationships. And so that is something that we really do emphasize as key in a primary preventive approach. So I think you bring up a really good point, and I think it's really important to bring the localization agenda and to bring localization into this discussion. And what we're hoping to see down the line is to be able to better support local and national NGOs to implement primary preventive approaches. And this actually links us back to a service that we have available under this project, which is we have previously led, and we will be restarting what we're calling virtual clinics, which is really just a opportunity for one-on-one coaching and mentoring with the primary prevention focal point of the Alliance. As I mentioned, that role is currently under recruitment. We are hoping to have somebody in that role as of July. But what this will be is opportunities for Alliance members or for child protection actors who are interested in adapting or adopting a primary prevention approach to be able to talk with somebody who is an expert on primary prevention and to get their guidance and their support in developing proposals, in developing trainings for teams, in adapting ongoing programs to take a more primary preventive approach. And so that service and that coaching and mentoring is available for anybody in the Alliance. We will be advertising about it more widely once it's fully back up and running, but that's something I do encourage people who are interested in adopting this approach to take advantage of. And the other thing that I do want to emphasize is that in the development of the framework, as well as in the prevention advisory group at the Alliance, we have quite a number of local NGO partners, because it was very important for us to ground this framework in what is actually going to work, and in terms of and ensuring that those voices were actively involved and helped to mold this piece. So it is something that in the overall initiative is very important. And I think, I think it's something that we need to continue to keep a spotlight on. So thank you for that question. And I'll stop there because I see both Anthony and Monica have raised their hands, and I'll try not to take up more time.
Anthony, please.
Oh yeah, thank you. Thank you for allowing to talk about the same issue for the second time. Yeah, just like we said initially, due to budget constraints, it was not easy to bring on a local partner. But in terms of working with the local partners, I think the pilot prevention project is working with the local partners, especially not only local, even international NGOs. For example, UN OCHA is aware of the primary prevention project, and in fact, they really applauded Plan International for having introduced this kind of approach, especially in reducing child protection risks to children. We're also working with the protection cluster, and they are also aware of what is happening, protection cluster and the livelihoods cluster, including local NGOs working in the area, because we've already told them of what we are doing, and they are aware that we shall be referring some of the beneficiaries to them to access livelihood opportunities. So in terms of working with local partners on the ground, besides the budget constraints, they have really been engaged, and they are being updated regularly on the process, and they actually expect to receive some of the referrals from our end in terms of more support for livelihoods. Thank you. Over to you, Monica.
Thank you so much, Anthony, for remarking that part of working with the CBIR and the protection and the FSL clusters, which I think is a really indicative of the good work that's been done. As just to mention, Coach, just before I gave the floor to you, it's been mentioned throughout the webinar, but it's never enough to emphasize that primary prevention approach is not one that an organization can do in isolation. It's everyone's business, and it's central for its effectiveness and success that everybody, or as many actors as possible, are on board, coordinated, and work together through the same goal, and also including different sectors. So the fact that in South Sudan they have managed to engage, apart from local authorities and communities, which you also mentioned, but also a part of that humanitarian architecture working on protection and livelihood and FSL opportunities, is actually really good indication of how this can be integrated in the work that others are doing to join those forces. But I just wanted to just say that and give the floor to Kobo. Kobo, please.
Oui, merci Monica pour la parole. Je voulais juste insister, bon, parce que j'ai vu aussi une réaction au niveau du chat concernant les bonnes pratiques qui étaient liées au certificat et enregistrement de naissance. Pour ça, je vais parler un peu de cet accord tripartite qu'on avait avec les structures sanitaires, la mairie et Plan International, qui a aidé vraiment à booster l'enregistrement des enfants au sein de l'état civil. Vous voyez que c'est important que la structure que l'on met en place, on ait d'abord un point d'entrée où on a connaissance de naissance, on ait un point d'accompagnement où on a la mairie qui vraiment acte les naissances. Parce que dans les premières analyses qu'on avait faites, on a remarqué que ce qui arrivait, ce qui était beaucoup plus soulevé, c'était le fait que la communauté avait peur du temps que ça prenait. Et comme c'était des déplacés et des réfugiés, et ils n'étaient pas très à l'aise avec cette situation-là parce que ça prenait beaucoup de temps pour l'enregistrement. Mais avec ce système qui a été mis en place, où il y avait des volontaires et des acteurs qui suivaient au niveau de la mairie, c'était plus facile pour eux et ils étaient très à l'aise. Ça leur permettait d'avoir d'autres occupations en dehors du suivi de l'enregistrement à l'état civil. Mais un autre niveau aussi qui a été très impactant, c'était la présence des volontaires. On a remarqué que il y avait des cas qui n'arrivaient pas à l'état civil, il y avait des cas qui n'arrivaient pas au niveau de structures sanitaires, mais avec la présence des volontaires communautaires, eux, ils sont de la communauté et étaient au courant des naissances qui s'est passé au niveau des domiciles, au niveau des communautés et même des nouveaux arrivants, et ça permettait à ce qu'ils puissent avoir connaissance de ça et les accompagner dans cette démarche, parce que certains étaient ignorants des démarches et avec la présence des volontaires, ils étaient au courant des cas communautaires et ils accompagnaient vraiment ces cas-là pour jusqu'à l'obtention. Et ça a vraiment aidé et je peux partager ça comme étant une très, très bonne pratique. Merci. À toi, Monica.
Thank you, Kobo. Thank you for that, highlighting again also the immense and very interesting and very root work that we've been doing in terms of like working at the community level, with the community level throughout the whole process. Somebody was asking that similar question on the chat. We really believe that a primary prevention approach is one that is a community-led approach, and including the role of the community mobilizers that have been fundamental in not only mobilizing, but like getting communities to understand the concepts of risk and protected factors, working through them, like understanding the issues that are affecting children at the community. So that's also been a very good learning for us on like the need of engaging communities and community mobilizers from the very beginning. Is it any other question? Yeah.
Question in the chat.
In the chat?
Sandra, on how does the primary prevention approach apply the lens of child rights? If you'd like to perhaps give some thoughts on that.
Well, I would say that the primary prevention approach, it's actually a child rights approach because it's looking at upholding the rights of all children at a community level. So all the different rights that a child has in terms of like a right to have their birth register, have an identity, have a safe place to live, have education, have a conducive environment, like caring parents, not be involved in armed conflict or armed forces, for example. Those are all premises that a primary prevention approach would actually be taken into account when designing the programming. So if we move to other levels of prevention that Michelle has mentioned before, secondary or tertiary, we might be looking at the specific groups of children that might be a specific risk of certain protection or harmful outcomes. But when we're talking about a primary prevention approach, we talk about like a population level in which all children are included. So therefore, all children have their rights upheld and respected and protected. So by definition, I'm not sure if this is a right thing to say. I mean, it's a little bit of a theoretical point, but by definition, I'll say that a primary prevention approach is one that is a child rights approach. And it's very much linked to the right of children to just be children. Not sure if you want to add anything else or if someone would disagree. I see a heart. That was nice. Thank you.
Perfectly, Monica. I have nothing to add.
Great. I don't know. I mean, according to the plan, we have 5 minutes, which we have reserved to give you a couple of slides on the resources. But I'm also tempted to have some more other questions. If somebody like, I mean, I can do that quite quickly. If anyone else wants to share something or maybe, you know, an idea or some other opinion, that should be fine for like 2 more minutes. And then we move to the resources, or if not, we can move directly to the resources, but just last chance for some more questions. It's fine? Oh, okay. All right. So, but anyhow, thank you. So to all the participants, I think your questions have been really great, really like touching some of the good buttons and very interesting. And then all your insights or reflections are also very valuable for us. But if we don't have any other questions, maybe Kira, please, I'll ask you to ask the next slide. Yeah. So I think this one is one of those that we need to click. There we go. So this slide is just to show you where you can find the tools, the guidelines, some of the ones that we have been highlighting today. So as a session, but also some additional ones. You will want to go to the prevention webpage on the Alliance website, and this is where the prevention focus materials are. You can find there the primary prevention framework that we have mentioned 1,000 times today, which includes some of the tools that we have also mentioned on how to collect, analyze, and prioritize risk and protective factors, which are going to be the base, the core of the rest of the programming afterwards. Then you can also find some more thematic guidance, like that one on preventing family separation. Then we also have a toolkit on children associated with armed forces and armed groups that has actually a very like a prevention component on it, a very strong prevention component, which I think might be interesting to look at from a thematic point of view. And also you can find a mini guide on how to prevent harm to children during infectious disease outbreaks. And this was developed over COVID. And again, it has a quite interesting prevention angle to it. And then the next slide. Here, oh, that's the mini guide. It was just there at the bottom. And in this one, yeah, I also thought that this would be interesting. So also you can access a series of short videos. And I personally find this very useful whenever you are conducting some trainings or awareness raising. Sometimes just watching a video, short video, it's actually quite you know, it's really visually interesting for participants, also depending on the level of understanding on prevention. I think these are really a set of really nice short videos that you could use. And again, you can find them in the website of the Alliance. And also very interesting resources that you can find are the learning packages, the training packages that were developed last year. So there you have two different sets, one that is more like a one-day training, so like a more simplified version if you want, but it's still, you know, obviously having all the important features related to the primary prevention work. And then you have another one that is a little bit more in-depth, and this is 3 days training. And it's the one that we've been using in both the country pilots to work with our staff, with other relevant stakeholders and practitioners. And it's really good, and I really recommend it if you like to train or to learn yourselves more about primary prevention. And again, so if you need more information on generally on primary prevention, resources, approaches, questions that you might have, Michelle before mentioned the clinics that we will be running again, but please don't feel shy or like feel free to just reach me, reach Michelle, anyone on the team. I mean, we can just leave our emails on the chat asking for anything, like from clarifications to questions that you might have to examples and resources. We'll be very happy to attend to you and to keep that conversation going. And now, I mean, I'll just want to say that to thank you very much to all of you for attending today this second session on the series of webinars. And we're just very, very happy that you were able to participate. I also like to thank all of you for like bringing participation and all my all the fantastic panel group that I think has been wonderful to have you all here and also answering the questions. And of course, also to the Alliance, Kira and the rest of the colleagues at the Alliance for providing this platform and also for like the wonderful coordination so that to make sure that the event today would run smoothly. And that's it, I think, from my side. But before we go, I mean, Michelle, Kobo, Anthony, Malisi, you want to also say your goodbyes. But before we all go, I'll just ask you to please fill up a couple of questions. They're very simple questions that we will place on them. I think they will come into your screen, which is like basically a feedback form from the webinar today, whether you have liked it, you didn't, something to improve. So that will help us a lot to actually, you know, get better on how we plan and deliver for the next session. So that's all from me. Thank you again. And I don't know if any of my colleagues will also want to have a few words before we close. Oh.
Okay. Hi, Monica.
Oh, yes, please.
Yeah. So thank you so much for leading this webinar. And I think we we have really enjoyed a lot from this webinar. And I think it's my first time also participating in this webinar. And definitely with the questions and feedbacks from participants, it actually also gives us, enough to be able to decipher and also to be able to get the ball rolling and be able to ensure that this prevention framework actually gets something that will benefit other people or other regions or other places elsewhere. So we will be working together with all who are here so that we really make something that is good for all to be able to benefit from it. And I think since we still have some few days, weeks, or a month plus to go, definitely we will also be gathering more resources, more information, more lessons learned to share when the time comes. So thank you so much for organizing this. And I think my last point is I haven't seen Kovo on video. I haven't seen Michelle on video. Maybe when they will be talking, let them put their cameras on so that I see them. Shukran.
Michelle is in video. Michelle has
Thank
been
you.
in video all the time. Thank you. Thank
Kovo.
you. Thank you, everyone. And like we see you on September in this next webinar in September. Okay. Keep tuned for the announcement.
Okay.
Thanks,
you.
everybody.
Bye bye.
Yeah.